This story took place about 5 years ago. I was a realtor and occasionally flipped houses. I often went to open houses in my area. I've always been into the housing business, and on this particular Saturday afternoon, I was looking at a new house that was built nearby. There was a handful of people there looking around, and the house was expected to sell for a great deal of money. I myself was looking for a house to flip, and when I was there, a man with a beard came up to me and struck up a conversation. He said his name was Steve. He asked me what I liked about the house, and he told me he was an agent of a nearby county. We talked for several minutes, and he told me about a property that was a great deal not too far away. He said a lot of great things about it, but that he didn't have the time to work with it. He told me it was going to sell fast. I was interested, and I ended up agreeing to follow Steve to the property. We left the house and got into our cars. I followed him down the road and then onto another road for several miles. Finally, we arrived at the property. It was in kind of a secluded neighborhood that looked pretty empty and on a cul-de-sac. It wasn't a very nice area, and I didn't know why Steve had been saying it was so nice to me. The house looked to be in really rough shape. Steve parked on the road out front, and we both got out and walked to the house. Steve said that he had the keys, and then led the way to the front door. When we got inside the house, it looked just as bad as the outside. I was expecting it to be in rough shape, but I thought the neighborhood was not very nice at all, and I just didn't see much of an area for profit for me. Overall, I was pretty uninterested in the house, and kind of disappointed. I felt that Steve had let me down after all the good things he had said about it, but I decided to look at the house with him anyways. He told me it had a really nice basement and said I just had to see it. Then he quickly went down the stairs in such a way that he kind of jogged. I thought it was strange, and I started to follow him down. I could see that it was pitch black down there, and Steve literally disappeared into the darkness. I took a couple of steps down the stairs and saw that the basement appeared to be unfinished. I heard Steve yell at me to come on, but when I heard him this time, he was much farther away. At this point, there were red flags going off in my head, and I said to Steve that I couldn't see anything down there. He just laughed. I decided to just turn around and leave. I had had enough. As I stepped back up the stairs, I heard Steve yell something in what sounded like Russian. I then turned around and barely saw another man at the side of the stairs. He appeared and began to walk up. I then started running the way the rest of the stairs and slammed the basement door shut behind me when I got to the top. I heard some more shouting in another language, and I quickly made my way through the kitchen to the front door. As I was doing this, I heard footsteps coming down quickly from the upstairs of the house. I opened the front door and ran as fast as I could to my car. Once I got inside, I started it and drove away. I really don't know if they chased me out of the house or not, but I'm pretty sure they didn't. I drove home carefully and then called the police and told them of my experience. The house was just a vacant home in a rough neighborhood, and it wasn't even for sale at all. I'm not sure what kind of setup I walked in on, but it was the scariest moment of my life. Two years ago, I got a new temporary job in another state. I needed to find a place to live, so I went house hunting. I wasn't looking for anything that nice, just something cheap and small that I could live in for the year. The houses in the area were very cheap, and I was tired of living in an apartment. I was working with a real estate agency that allowed you to look at houses without an agent because they could unlock the houses remotely. I had an appointment to look at a house that was the cheapest one on my list. It looked decent online and seemed nice when I got there. It looked just like it had in the pictures. It was a very old house, but it had good character. When I walked up and got inside, I saw that it had no furniture, but it looked really nice. The kitchen was decent sized and looked like it had been remodeled recently. I really liked what I was seeing as I looked around. The living room was decent as well, but as I was looking around it, I started to hear what sounded like footsteps coming from upstairs. I stopped and listened closer and could hear that it was definitely footsteps. Nobody was living in this house, and nobody was also supposed to be here, so I got a little creeped out. The footsteps stopped, and I ended up slowly looking around the rest of the main floor of the house. I wanted to look upstairs where my bedroom would be, but I was nervous. I stood at the base of the stairs for a good 2 or 3 minutes. I was so sure I had heard footsteps up there. I decided to text the realtor, asking them if anyone else was in the house. They texted me back rather quickly saying no. After not hearing anything, I decided to go up the stairs. I walked up and saw that there was a hallway with several doors. I looked through one, which was a bathroom, then another, which was a closet. The last 2 rooms were both bedrooms. I entered the first one slowly and saw that it was completely empty. I looked around it and then left and came to the last bedroom. The door was open just a few inches, so I couldn't really see inside. I thought that if I had in fact heard footsteps coming from up here, whoever it was had to be in this room. I considered just leaving, but this was the room that was supposed to be my bedroom, so I took a deep breath and slowly pushed the door open. When I did, I was relieved to see that the room was completely empty as well. I was a little confused though as to why I had heard footsteps before, but I decided it had to be just my imagination. I felt better and began walking back down the hallway. But as soon as I did, I felt a strange feeling come over me as if I was being watched. As a reaction to this, I walked pretty quickly to the staircase. As I reached the stairs, I turned, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw one of the bedroom doors swinging shut. It ended up slamming pretty loudly. I took off running and went all the way to the front door and left the house. I got back into my car where I felt safe, and I looked back at the house from across the street. I saw an upstairs window and saw what appeared to be a figure. I couldn't make out any details at all, but it looked like somebody was halfway in the window. Then they moved out of sight. I left, and even though the house was very nice, there was no way that I was going to buy it. I ended up moving into a place on the other side of town. I don't know to this day what happened in that house. This took place a few years ago. My wife and I were looking to move out of our apartment to a house, and we were just driving around town looking. We were in an area we hadn't really been to before, and just kind of exploring areas that looked nice. We came upon a neighborhood that seemed cool, and as we were driving through a wooded street between one of the neighborhoods and another, we saw a for sale sign that caught our eye. We were curious of the price, so we decided to stop. The house wasn't necessarily one we were interested in buying at first sight, but we wanted to get an idea of what the houses in this neighborhood were going for. We parked our car on the side of the road and got out. On the for sale sign, it didn't say a price, but we saw a smaller sign next to it that said open house. We decided to walk up to the house and look inside. We knocked on the door, but saw that it was open a crack. We saw another sign inside that said open house, so we walked inside. We called out hello, but there was no response. We decided that it would be okay to look around. When we made it to one of the bedrooms, we were looking inside, when suddenly all the lights went black and the door slammed shut. I used a flashlight on my phone to find the door. I couldn't see anything. I used a flashlight on my phone to find the door and saw that it was locked. There were no windows in the room at all. We called out for whoever was in there to let us out, but there was no response. We didn't know what was going on, so we decided to call the police. I watched the door the whole time to see if whoever locked us in the room would come back. They never did, and about 15 minutes later, the police showed up. They ended up having to break the door down. The entire property was searched, but the police didn't find any trace of anyone else. The for sale sign and open house signs had both been taken down. I don't know what happened that day, but my wife and I did not end up moving to that neighborhood.